Hello and welcome to my channel, From Profession to Passion, with me, Vicky Mittman. The purpose of this channel is to inform and inspire professionals to live their careers on their terms. Whilst the traditional route in many professions may work well for some, it isn't for everyone, and there are different ways of doing things. On this channel, I'll be sharing my own story of how I combined my profession in law with my passion for coaching and mentoring, and I'll be interviewing other professionals who've developed their own side hustles, changed career directions altogether, or found some other way to involve their passions in their professional lives. I'm joined today by Hutchings, which I'm really excited about because Kat and I have known each other for a few years, and Kat actually helped me with my own transition from being just a lawyer to being a lawyer and a coach. And Kat herself, she's worked with senior leaders in key transition moments as an executive coach and a master NLP practitioner, but her background was in financial services, which is a bit of a departure. So Kat, why don't you tell us a bit more about your story?
Yes, yeah, I'd love to, and thank you for the invitation today. Where to start? So exactly as you said, so I coach leaders at pivotal moments. They are either looking for a career change or they're stepping into a bigger leadership role. So there's some kind of transition happening, and they're looking for greater clarity and to really dial up that unique contribution. But that is not where I started. That is not where I started. So I started as a banker. I'm a banker by trade. I worked with large international and UK businesses to borrow tens, 20s, hundreds of millions of pounds to invest in and grow their businesses and create, a great environment for their staff and serve their customers. So a long way, perhaps, from coaching. Probably the moment where I started that transition was what I hope will turn out to be a quarter life crisis. So having, sort of gone through some of those sort of rungs up the hierarchy in banking, I was on holiday and just had an absolute pause moment. So I had a break, shut down work, fully in holiday mode. And I suddenly realised that this isn't it. This isn't it for me. What am I doing? I did an English degree. How did I end up in banking? It just blew my mind. And I thought, how have I ended up here? But this isn't right. It was right. I enjoyed it. Had some amazing colleagues and clients. But this isn't it anymore. Something's wrong. So that niggle in the back of my mind got to the point where it was screaming at me. I'd ignored it for a while. And that moment on holiday, that was the transition moment. And I hired a life coach. And it was that life coach that helped me to see how working within such a large organization, I didn't just need to be a banker, because banks do hundreds of other things in and around providing banking services to clients. So there was so much opportunity for me inside the firm that wasn't directly where I was at the moment. So it sparked two things. It sparked a career change into leadership. So I went to lead in a more kind of head office environment. So I ran customer experience teams, digital marketing teams, conduct, onboarding. So I held some leadership roles in those areas. And at the same time, this life coach sparked my curiosity about coaching as a process, and about entrepreneurship. So over 4 years ago, I set up my side hustle. I trained and qualified as a coach, and for the last 4 years, I've been building my coaching practice. But that was probably the kickstart moment, that moment on holiday.
I think that's really something, and a lot of people probably have that feeling that even though it's not bad, something's just not right. And I certainly had that. And like I was in a good firm for a long time, and I enjoyed working with my colleagues. I had some really interesting matters, but I just felt like this wasn't where I needed to be forever. And it was, I was grateful for what it had given me, which was lots of experience and lots of different people to work with, but it wasn't where I wanted to be forever. And I think that's really something to listen to. And I probably left it for longer than I should have done before I started thinking, right, what is next? And if I'm going to engineer something for me for the future, what's that going to look like? And I think it's interesting that it happened for you sort of on holiday in a pause moment when you thought, right, now something's got to change. So now what's the position now? Where are you at the moment?
Yeah, so actually this is a big transition year for me. So two things. Firstly, I had a baby in January.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So she is now 10 months old. And the other big transition is that, to me, was another catalyst moment. And I thought, actually, having run my business for 4 years in 1 day a week, whilst working 4 days a week in a corporate job, and we could talk a bit about that, actually, how I negotiated that. Actually, it was time for me to fully back myself in business. There was always going to become, to be a moment where I felt like I wanted to fly solely off in the direction of my business, and that came this year. And it's just given me an opportunity to look at how I want to work my life going forward. And that's going to be a combination of running my own business, working with individuals, working with companies, and creating the family life that I really want.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear more about how you sort of negotiated that 4 days a week with your employer and 1 day a week for your own business, because I think a lot of professionals don't feel that that's an option, and probably because of something we have in us that doesn't think it's an option. If we ask, we'll be told no, and it'll be a failure. But and there are, for example, part-time lawyers out there, but it never occurred to me that I could speak to my employer and say, could I go down to 3 days a week doing this because I want to run a business on the side? Because I just felt that wouldn't be entertained. So how did you do that? How did that work with the bank you were working with?
Yeah, it was fascinating hearing you say that, because I had loads of similar thoughts going through my head. It's amazing how we make these things really difficult for ourselves, isn't it? So one of the beliefs that I had was that these kind of arrangements were for people with families. So why would they agree to a day off a week when I didn't have an excuse or reason? I didn't have a real reason to convince them. It was just, actually, I wanted to create some space for myself, and I thought it'd be really fun to create a business, and I was sure that whatever I was learning and doing in my business would benefit the bank, and it certainly did. But at that moment, I was carrying all sorts of baggage about what people would think of me. Would I have to write on my auto signature that these were my working days, and how did that feel? That was a different identity for me. All sorts of these different barriers came up and got in my way. But I practiced this with my coach. And ultimately, I had to do this 3 times with 3 different bosses over the course of that 4-year period, right? So I didn't just negotiate it once, I did it 3 times, and the first time was definitely the hardest. And I prepared for that conversation. I got into how I was going to say it, and ultimately the way I phrased it was, the role that I'm currently doing, I've worked out that I can do it in 4 days a week.
Yeah, so they're not losing anything really, because you're doing your same role but in basically a condensed manner.
Exactly. So I walked in with the solution, and I said that phrase, and I stopped talking, and I waited for the reaction. I didn't jump in with, and I can justify that because, and here's what we'll do, and it do me a favor, and thank you so much. So I didn't sort of put myself in, the kind of adult child conversation, logical levels. I went in as an adult to talk to another adult with a thought through idea and plan, and I practiced how I was going to deliver that. And yes, it caught him by surprise. He quickly recovered, and then we had a grown-up conversation about how we'd make that work and how we'd test it. And we set it off as a pilot, and 4 years later it was still running. So it worked, and it worked well. Something that worked. Exactly. So I'm very much of the belief that if you think that you've got an idea and this is the way you want to do it your way. Do it your way. So don't necessarily use my words, but do rehearse your own.
And it's got to be really aligned with what you work. it's got to be aligned with what you want to work, or how you want it to work, and with your own style, because if you're using someone else's words, that might be uncomfortable as well, and that will come across if you're trying to put that point across confidently. No, I completely agree. And actually that brings me nicely onto my next question, actually, which was knowing what you do now and having done what you've done over the past 4 years or so, is there anything you do differently?
Yes, a really good question. I would look more closely at my mindset and how I was managing that, because I'm the kind of person that once they decide to do something, I want to do it now. Yeah. And so there were intense periods of frustration over that 4-year period, because there were times when my business was growing and I was capped out. So I was fully booked because I only had that 1 day a week and evenings available to be running the business. Yeah. And that was frustrating. But then equally, there'd be moments in my corporate job where I was, working full out, really invested in the work that I was doing, really excited. So in my corporate job, I didn't mention actually, I did end up running a team of coaches. Yeah. So I was a coach, coaching executives at the bank, and I was leading a team of coaches who likewise were coaching senior leaders across the business. And that just brought so much fulfillment that I wanted to carry both. Yeah. So in the good moments, I was thinking, how amazing is it that I've got this job where I get to bring, all of my coaching skills to bear, and I have my own private coaching practice where I get to coach people in different industries in different moments and get more breadth and experience. Absolutely. And then in the low moments, I was annoyed with both. So the roller coaster of having your own practice, I think, is something that people don't realize. Like, the highs are higher, like the moments of euphoria are higher, and the lows are lower. Like, who am I? Why am I doing this? Like the identity crisis that just doesn't come so naturally in a corporate job. So yeah, I would love to be able to tell myself 4 years ago that it's the journey, and actually having fun along the way is the most important part. I think someone tried to tell me that.
But do you hear it at the time when you need it most?
What are they? Rubbish. That, what kind of phrase is that? But it's proven to be true in my experience. And linked to that, the real benefit that I had, because I had a smaller amount of time, I could really think about who I really wanted to work with. Yeah. So I'd say, don't be afraid when it's your own gig, your own side hustle, your own business, to say no to things. It's so empowering. Like, how amazing is it to be able to say, actually, I don't think we're a good fit, but I know some other coaches who you'd really enjoy meeting and potentially working with. Shall I introduce you? Yeah. What an empowering place to be as a business owner. In a corporate job, we have fewer choices because some part of that might be our job to deliver. Yeah. But as a business owner, realizing that I could say no and make decisions aligned with me, my business, and what would be best for the client, really, really empowering. And that would have been nice to know a bit earlier. I've learned that along the way.
Yeah, likewise. And I think, again, coming from a corporate background, frequently a partner in my team would put a file on my desk saying, can you just deal with this matter? And there'd be a briefing and stuff, but it wasn't something I'd chosen to deal with. It wasn't a client I'd chosen to work with, or the structure that I wanted to work on that deal. But there wasn't really a choice, because I was a lawyer in that team and that was my job. And for years, I just thought that was the way of the world. And now, like you, I've had some prospective coaching clients come to me, but actually what they're looking for is really more lifestyle coaching, or it's more business coaching. And I don't do some of that crunching the numbers and working out if something's going to be profitable. I work a lot more with mindset and confidence, particularly for professionals coming out of a fairly traditional profession that has this really well-trodden route and path that everyone must follow and must go down, and just helping them realize there are other options so that they can live a little bit more in line with their mission. And it took me a while before I actually worked out who my ideal client was. And actually, you know, I probably have a couple of ideal clients, but I'm much clearer now on when someone walks through the door and says, can I talk to you about coaching, whether it's going to be a good fit, and like you can point people in the right direction if it's not a good fit. And I think that's really crucial. I mean, that's just, it's got me thinking about so much, because I always do when I speak to you. I think it's fascinating. But what would you say to people who'd thought about doing this? They're professionals at the moment, but they're looking at maybe branching out, not too sure about the steps. What was helpful to you? Did you have any resources that you read, or videos that you watched? Is there anything that you would pass on and say, this is a great place to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, that I'm absolutely 100% behind, you know, your mission of supporting people who want to side hustle, because it's a way to do it and feel safe.
Yeah.
So whenever we're trying to change anything, our mind, our primitive brain will trigger and say, don't do that. What if people don't like you anymore and you're no longer in the tribe and you have to survive on your own? Or, you know, you don't go out and face the saber-toothed lion on your own, right? So, you know, your brain will kick off all of these different reasons why you shouldn't do something. And I had that and still experience that in different ways. And by doing it, taking this step of following my curiosity, being creative, setting up the business and having that outlet, and still having the security of having the mortgage paid by a job, like there's something truly to be said for being able to have both. Yeah. Because it's just giving you the opportunity to do that. I have huge admiration for people who dive straight in as well. So there's no one way to do it. But having the side hustle approach has really helped me to manage my mind. And then I've picked a moment now where actually I've been running that for a while, and this feels like a good moment for me. I mean, there's never, ever a perfect time, is there? No. But it feels like the right moment. So absolutely, I would advocate for trying it, exploring, experimenting, having a go, and doing it as a side hustle. So that'd be one thing. And other resources, so it depends what people are looking to do, but so a book that really inspired me and helped me start to think about or realize how much my brain was running the show, Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap. One of my favorites. It's a little bit science, it's a little bit magic, quite like the combination. And The Chimp Paradox. Those help you to understand how your mind is running the show and give you some actual strategies for managing it. Those are two books that sparked my curiosity and interest in neuroscience, and then I've gone on to look at that and mindfulness and psychology. So I would definitely recommend those for anybody who's wanting to work on themselves. And then for people who are interested in growing a coaching practice specifically, Rich Litvin, The Prosperous Coach.
Yeah, I think you told me about that actually in our early conversations, and it's one I've gone back to a few times, because when I first read it, I wasn't quite ready to hear it, but then when I read it again, I was like, oh yeah, this makes more sense now. And it's almost more like reading something when it's right for you. And when I read The Chimp Paradox pretty before we started speaking actually, but I remember thinking, this is exactly what I needed to know. And it helped me deal with what was a bit of a tumultuous time as I was leaving the firm. It was done in a very nice way. You know, my firm were very supportive, but there were several what I would have previously classed as difficult or emotional conversations. And because of reading that and understanding how my brain was working and what my inner chimp would be doing, I was able to deal with that in a much better way, because I was, you know, letting the human take over and deal with it as a grown-up and as a logical adult. And that was amazing, because it helped me so much. And even my mother said to me, you know, there's been a real change in your reactions to things, because I think I was getting het up and stressed, and that's when my protective chimp was trying to come out and take over and look after me, but it wasn't what was needed. So that was a really great book. Good suggestion. I hadn't thought of that recently. So well, that's great, Kat. Thank you so much for joining me. And if people want to get in touch with you, is there an easy way for them to do that?
Yes, yep. So active on LinkedIn, Kat Hutchings on LinkedIn, or my website, www.katthecoach.com.
Brilliant. And we'll
I'd love
drop
to hear
those.
from you.
Yeah, we'll drop those links into the comments after this video, or into the blurb. But that's really brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us. And I would say to anyone out there who's considering branching out of their profession in some way, have a chat, because there are plenty of us that have done it. People like Kat and I have done it, and so many more, many of whom I'll interview over the next few weeks. But it's really good to know there are people out there, and I would have probably really benefited from chatting to other professionals who were just a few years ahead of me, who had done it and could tell you what went right, what went wrong, share their stories. So always feel free to reach out. My details are below as always. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope it's provided some food for thought. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe below and feel free to like or comment. I'd love to know what you think. If you're interested in hearing more about this, please join my Facebook community, From Profession to Passion with Vicky Mittman. I'll see you next time.